today I have a very different guest. And in particular, why this person's pretty special is because we're in career two. And his name is Dre Baldwin. He started in professional sport, and particularly he was on the bench in high school, but then in college he went straight to the top. He went from there to 9 years in pro basketball across 8 countries. It doesn't stop being impressive there. He's produced 8,000 videos, 40 books, 4 TEDx talks. It continues. And he's built the work on your game brand before it was really a thing and cool, etc. And whilst that's something that he did on his own, no one really handed anything to him. He's done something even more interesting, and that is he's shelved that and he's now starting a new line in 2026. And he's really looking at something that this audience is seriously interested in, that's execution. And so through the process today, we're going to go over the 5 topics. They're all Dre's topics, and we've all heard discipline stories, but what we want to see is the working underneath that, what keeps people on track. Let's have an honest conversation. Let's make it a little bit tough because he's a pro in so many senses of the word. Dre Baldwin, welcome to Epic Execution.
David, thank you for having me on. Hopefully I can live up to
I'm
that
sure you will, my
introduction.
friend. Just for the audience, we're all mad sports people. Not all, but lots of us are mad sports people in Australia. And I know that's an illustrious career. Can you maybe give us a little bit of an intro on who you really are? And, for anyone that hasn't seen your work, can you give us the Dre story?
Sure. Always played sports growing up. Got around to basketball around age 14. So that was the sitting on the bench in high school. 'Cause I had started pretty late. And if you're going to play a sport in college, let alone at the pro level, you usually start much younger. So going to college, walked on, meaning nobody was asking me to come play. I just went to college as a student and then just tried to get on the team. Made it, but only at the Division III level. That's not the level that the pro teams are looking for their next players from. They usually look in Division I. So getting out of college, nobody was checking for me to come play pro or asking me to. So I had to go market and sell myself. Was able to do it. That started the career, nearly a decade, and traveling the world playing basketball. At the same time, started putting my name out there or getting my name out there because I took some workout footage that I had and I started putting it on this new website called YouTube. And that's where I started to get a name for myself, even though I didn't do it because I was trying to get known. I wasn't trying to be an influencer. It was just, I wanted to be able to look at my own footage and just see if I looked the way that I thought I looked in my own head. But then when I noticed people liked it, I started doing more of it. That's when I started to build what most people now call influencing, but back then we were calling it a personal brand. And from there led to me selling programs, eventually writing books when players started asking me about the mental side of my approach, because they just saw how consistent I was. Or how do you show up and train every day? Because like anyone at any job, no athlete always feels like training. No player always feels like playing. So how were you able to do that? And that's when I started talking about things like discipline and confidence and mental toughness. That became the foundation of work on your game. And it's a great slogan, if I may say so myself, David, because it connects not only in sports, but also off the court. So the mindset piece is what started connecting my message to non-athlete professionals. They started finding me because of the mindset piece of what I was doing on YouTube. And that told me, well, I can take that and I can serve these people even when I'm done playing. So I stopped playing basketball in 2015. For the last 10 years, we've been doing all the stuff that we're probably about to talk about right now.
So from success on the court in 8 odd countries, I think it was. So, some pretty tough battles on the court, but into the boardrooms. So, Dre, take us into a boardroom now that you're in and you're applying this discipline and this work product around execution. What are some of the things you look for in the boardroom that you know that this is something that you're going to really add some, intense value to?
Well, the big thing in business is really about the execution and what's going to affect the bottom line, because companies aren't really buying quote unquote mindset. So discipline is good. And of course, every professional needs it, but they're not in the market for mindset unless they're hiring some motivational speaker for their conference. But other than that, they're looking for the execution layer, because most companies have some form of operating procedure or system already in place. So they're not looking to necessarily replace that. But what happens is what we call execution drift. Depending on the size of the company, the more people you have, people start drifting off of the system, not quite doing it the way they're supposed to be doing it, freelancing, doing it in their own personal ways. And then what happens is in the long run, you get the lagging indicator of results being inconsistent, and But everybody's still operating the system, David. So people are like, well, if everyone's operating the system, why are we getting inconsistent outcomes? And people are dumbfounded as to how that's happening. And usually it's because people are operating the system with an asterisk, meaning they're doing it a little bit the way it's supposed to be done, a little bit not the way it's supposed to be done. So my job is to come in there and fix that and make sure everyone's on the same page in a measurable and accountable way, not in a, let's say, subjective way where people are just going off what they feel, but also off of what we
I
can
think
measure,
that's
what
a
we
really
can count.
important point that, and I often refer that to as like as a clarity tax, so that often the founder or the CEO knows exactly what they want to do, but it's not coming out of their head the same way as the team are receiving it. And is that one of the first signs you think that you can't quite understand what they're expecting people to do, or connecting vision with some of the tasks that they're being asked to do, or they just aren't explaining things? What are some of the things you're going to first notice in the boardroom when you're first with one of your clients?
Depends on the size of the company. If we're talking a smaller company, then it is usually what you're talking about, depending on smaller, meaning what leadership can manage where they know what everybody is doing. That is when the leadership needs to communicate, okay, this is exactly what we want. Now, at the same time, how do we get what we want into the heads of the people who are operating in a way that they understand and a way that they can actually execute and it matches what you want? So sometimes there's a translation. You have to translate what leadership wants to what the operators are going to execute or what the staff is going to execute. Now, at a larger company, they usually have it pretty clear what they want. It's documented what they want. Now, how do we make sure every person in the organization, because the leader probably doesn't even know everybody who works there. Like when a company is smaller, you can shake everybody's hand and meet them during the interviews. Company gets bigger, you're walking past somebody in the building and you don't know them, they don't know you. So what do you do at that level when it's more at scale? How do you make sure everyone's operating the exact same way, again, in a way that is measurable and in which everybody can be held accountable in a fair and consistent way? And that's when it becomes more execution layer, whereas at a smaller level, it's more clarity level. It's execution as well, but clarity can be, we can still play around with it when you have 10 people there. You can't play around, we got a
No,
thousand.
absolutely. So as teams grow, unless they have this embedded, the problems become bigger, and line managers become important. Divisions and clarity around expectations, deliverables, etc. Um, it's no different to a sports team in many ways. So you've now installing these systems into companies. What do you think that people expect when they engage you? Is it somebody's going to, you're going to give them a playbook? What do they expect, and what's the difference between what they receive?
Well, what they will expect is what I told them, which is going to be, we're going to make sure that everyone is operating at a way that is measurable and countable. So we can put it into a black and white, each piece that needs to be executed so that everyone on the team can see, okay, here's the 18 things that I need to be doing every day or get completed every week. And there's a score there. So then their manager, supervisor, the boss, whoever can look at those 18 things and say, okay, you completed 9 out of 18. You're at 50%. What do you need in order to get these other 50% done? And if everyone's being measured the exact same way, now leadership can say, okay, if everyone's doing 100% of these 18 things, we should be expecting a certain outcome. And if you're not getting that outcome, then obviously the problem is not the execution of the team. Maybe it's the system. But we want to make it black and white and make it clear what exactly could be causing any issue if there is an issue. And if everyone's executing the way they should be, assuming that your standard operating procedures and your systems are tight and they are working, quote unquote, then you're going to be getting the results that you want. Now you just have to keep everybody on that system, because when everything is working, that's when people tend to take their foot off the gas, take their eye off the ball, metaphorically speaking, and then the drift happens again. So you got to keep it up with people, because scientific law of entropy states that when you do not enforce standards and parameters, you get chaos and disorder. So you have to keep on top of that system consistently over time, and that's
Yeah,
what
I think
we do.
that there's a lot to be said for management when people are giving helpful instructions to set people up to succeed, as opposed to micromanaging or excessive communication. Now, one of the things that I see a lot of people going in and out of is looking at OKRs and KPIs and stand-up meetings every Monday and Friday afternoon. Well, how did we go? Now, with all these systems out there, what do you think some of the key things are that shine through, that when everybody has to get it. Like having a common language, having a common set of rules and goals and abilities to find things faster, like to stay on track. What are some of the hallmarks maybe of the systems that you think will cut through and provide value?
The hallmark says, well, first of all, clarity. People need to know exactly what is expected of them. They need to have access to the resources and or tools necessary to fulfill those expectations. And as they old management saying is, people don't do what you expect, they do what you inspect. They need to know that they're going to be checked on and held accountable for and or corrected if necessary for non-compliance, for non-completion and not doing what they're supposed to be doing. Because again, this is just human nature. And sometimes leaders or managers or just people hear me talk about this stuff, they say, well, that sounds like what you just said. Sounds like a little bit of micromanaging. Sounds like maybe somebody's looking over my shoulder or kind of breathing down my neck with what I'm doing. And you can call it that. That's not really what it is. What it is accountability. And the reality is human beings comply at a higher level when they know they will be held accountable, when they know they're being watched and they know their work's going to be checked on. And when people know that they're not going to be held accountable and nobody's going to correct them on non-compliance, they tend to not comply. This is,
Yeah,
again, it has, yes, it does matter the level of the person. Higher level performers, some tend to be self-driven and they'll do it on their own. But there are not enough self-driven people in the world as you scale a company that your whole company is going to be like that. So you have to factor in, for the lack of a better term, lowest common denominator. And this is why you put systems of checks and balances in place, so to speak, for the people, for the humanity
so how
of
do you
people.
think you design this when a lot of people are enjoying still work from home or are enjoying the autonomy and freedoms to self-direct? And like, where is the line there for accountability and agency and getting people to celebrate wins as opposed to drift?
Great question. So, if we take it out of the business context and give you a metaphor, Napoleon Bonaparte was known for creating the what we now call the mission statement. Right? He would tell his lieutenants, "I'm not going to tell you exactly what to do or how to do it. I'm just going to tell you what you need to get done. And you come to me when the mission is done, and either tell me you got it done or you didn't get it done. If you didn't get it done, you need to explain to me why and what was missing. And you can do that if you have people working from home, or you have people who you feel can be left to operate autonomically, or people who don't want to be micromanaged, or you don't want to micromanage them or feel as if you're micromanaging them. Okay, fine. Here's the mission. Here's what you need to get done. Hey, I need 20 new leads in this CRM. I need these 30 people to be followed up with. I need these calls to be made. I need this many appointments on the calendar. If you get that done, I don't care how you do it. I don't care if you take 8 hours or 2 hours to get it done. If it's done, we're in a good space. If it's not done, then I'm going to be coming to you saying, okay, why'd you come up short here? What's missing? What do you need in order to get this done? And if you can't get it done, then do I need to put somebody else in that spot? So if the person wants the autonomy, the trade-off of the autonomy is you still must get the job done by the mission, not necessarily by the, you need to follow the steps that I'm giving you. You take whatever steps you want. Just make sure the job's done the way it's supposed to be done, and we're in a good
Now, the
space.
outcomes are really what we're all looking for. And I always say there's only three things that matter in business. One is margin, second is retention, and the third is customer satisfaction. And all of those come from those achieving those things that the leaders know need to be done. And sometimes they don't know what needs to be done. So therefore, getting the mix right of letting the smartest people in the room direct and say, look, we understand the outcome, let's just get it done. But how are you seeing in boardrooms now with the advent of AI that is just really very, very prolific in the individual operator? How are you seeing that go into team dynamics as well, where there's shared knowledge? Because collaboration is really one of the key things in sport or in teams, and communication and quicker decisions, better knowledge, all that sort of stuff. How are you seeing some of these team-based AI tools, or how's this changing your world as well too, Dre?
David, I'm hearing a little bit of feedback on your end. Do you hear that?
Not at my end, but maybe I think the signal's okay. I don't know.
I think it's something with the, on your mic, wherever your microphone is. I'm hearing a little bit of
Pretty
feedback.
lazy podcaster. I don't have all the road equipment. I'll just
Yeah. Okay.
I
It's
don't know.
fine now. All right. Now,
Okay, so
answering your
sorry, mate.
question. Yeah, it's fine.
So what I was
Okay.
thinking
No, I got it.
was these are amazing insights that, having expectations on people to do this or get it done, do it your own way until it's not done. But how is AI and the proliferation of AI that people are using AI so much at a personal level? What are some of the things that you are seeing coming through in the businesses and the rooms you're in, where there's a more team dynamic around AI and as it gets to enterprise? And so I feel like there's three layers. How are you seeing this manifest in the rooms you're in? And what are we, you're based in the US, I'm in Australia. What are some of the things that we might be seeing? And often the US is a bit ahead. What are you seeing, Dre, with AI in the rooms you're in?
I think what's happening in the US is probably either already happening in Australia or it's soon to be happening, is that a lot of people or companies are creating AI based, let's just call it technology, applications, et cetera, that can help with the exact things that we're talking about here. For example, tracking, accessibility, the ease of, let's say, a manager or head operator, head of operations, to be able to look at how is everybody executing, where are we lagging, where are we coming up short? Because what AI is doing, if I had to simplify it, it's taking the things that, I mean, it's literally called artificial intelligence. So it's taking the same things that human beings are already doing. It just can do it a lot faster, a lot more efficiently, and it can do it consistently without needing a lunch break or vacation, and it doesn't get sick. So AI just makes it happen faster. If somebody like me, let's say I was manually going around and checking on everyone's execution, a 300-person staff, AI can do what it would take me a week to do. It can do it in 5 minutes. So that's what AI is able to do. Make it easier to measure what's happening if we're talking simply execution. If we're just talking overall business, I can do a million things. It just depends on the type of business that we're talking. But the execution layer thing, it makes it easier to track. It makes it easier for people to log and look at what they're doing themselves. And it makes it easier because AI has artificial intelligence. It can figure out, where are you coming up short? Why are you coming up short? What could be the possible reasons? And hey, here's what you can do about it. Here's how AI that is, how I can help you fix this problem and
Love it.
get to the
One
next
of my
step.
mates, Jeff McQueen, is the CEO. He sold a company before he went over to, born in Australia, went to Denver mainly. Just coming back to Australia, he's launched a company called Worksites, and that's for it's a tool you might want to have a check out because it's really goes from the individual player level all the way through to enterprise. I think that's a really cool thing that people can collaborate over rather than having these micro moments and then thinking, well, I'm going to do this or keep it to myself. But how it integrates across teams, I think, is very interesting. So you talk about leadership misalignment as a root of execution failure. So when people are misaligned, how much of that comes down to clarity, do you think, and how much to incentives? Like, what's driving behavior the most in your experience at the moment? Is it just people want to do a good job? They want to work with a good leader? They want to work in a good team? Is it revenue or incentive based? What are you seeing right now, Dre?
Number one is, in my experience, it's usually clarity. Even when we're dealing with business owners and leadership, it's usually clarity in terms of, does everyone understand the mission? Is the mission being clearly communicated? Does everyone receive the communication? And does everyone know what to do with the communication? All right, those clarity issues, if those questions are all yes, then the execution is a relatively simple thing to diagnose. But when the clarity is not there, then you have confusion. And the reality is, I tell this to entrepreneurs and salespeople all the time, that a confused prospect usually does not ask questions. They just go away. They go somewhere where they're not confused because a lot of people just don't want to feel embarrassed asking what they may feel is a quote unquote stupid question. Even at a job, they won't do it. So if your communication is not clear, people will just do what they think they understand, and it might not be what you're trying to say. So one of my personal superpowers is my ability to break down what someone is trying to get across and make sure that everybody understands exactly what they're getting across, so that there's no confusion. So clarity is, I would say, 60% of the pie. From there, assuming, and this is what I tell owners and leaders all the time, I'm going to assume that the people you hired are competent because you hired them. All right. So you didn't hire a bunch of
Perhaps.
bums who don't know what they're doing. Yeah, perhaps. That's why I said I'm going to assume. I'm assuming that they're good. So they want to do a good job. They want to collect their check. So they're going to do what you're asking them to do. And they're pretty much going to follow through as long as they know what the job is for the most part, most of the time. So if they're not doing that, then there's probably a clarity issue somewhere there, or there's an accountability issue. They're just drifting because this is what human beings do when they're not held accountable. We drift. This is just how it goes. It's human nature. So it's usually one
I
of
love
those
it.
two things.
So the second thing that really I feel like a lot of leaders are their own worst enemy, and they create this resistance in their own organization, is the clarity around the strategy, the tactics, is all great, but how much do you think goes into getting people on the same page rather than just saying, "Here's what we're doing. Here's how we're gonna play. Here's how we're gonna win." But how much of it is creating buy-in as well? Like, there's clarity and then there's buy-in as well. What do you think the some of the I feel like buy-in is still important, and the emotional connection with, "We wanna solve this problem. This is something we believe we can achieve." It's not just being getting a clear instruction. There's more to teams will win more often if they want to win it beyond clarity. Maybe that's your 40%. I don't know.
It's a great question. And I'll use a sports analogy here. It's right now in the United States, the basketball playoffs, NBA playoffs are taking place. And in sports, especially team sports, everyone on the team needs to understand their role. Everybody has to not only understand their role, but accept and embrace their role. And especially at the pro level, even a collegiate level in sports, in every sport, you're going to have players who are asked to accept and embrace a role that may be asking them to do less than they feel they are capable of doing. Especially, again, at the collegiate and pro level, players are usually pretty good. As in the USA, percent of high school players get to play in college. So these are the best high school guys in college, and 1% of college players play in the pros. So at the pro level, you have guys sitting on the bench who probably think they should be playing if you ask them, but they're asked to embrace a role where, hey, you're only the eighth guy on the totem pole here, even though the last place they played, they were the number one guy. So how do you get people to accept that? And that's a leadership challenge. It's also a personality mix challenge, because there are some players out there, and I know from personal experience playing the sport, there are some players that they can't function if they're not the number one guy. They've been the number one guy their whole lives. You ask them to be the number six guy, they can't do it. But there are other guys who were the number one guy in their last place, but they can be number six here because they're mentally, they can accept that role. So within businesses, out of the sports analogy, but this applies in sports the same way it applies in business, you have to look at people's personalities and ask yourself, hey, can this person's personality adapt to no longer being that best person or no longer being in the number one spot? Now I'm asking them to do this, which may only ask them to do 40% of what they're capable of, but we don't need the other 60% here. We only need that 40%. And we need you to maximize on that 40%. Are you all right with that? And that becomes a personality thing. In sports, for example, we just had the NFL, American Football Draft. The basketball draft is coming up next month. And it's an inexact science because, yes, you can look at people's talent and you can measure their stats. Same way that as a hiring manager, HR, you can look at someone's resume, you can look at where they worked in the past. But how is their personality going to mesh with what we already have? And you don't always know, and there's no guaranteed way to predict this. I'm sure there's some AI system out there that claims they can do it, right? I'm sure there's somebody out there selling AI to every company. Hey, we can help you predict who is going to fit in your company and who won't. That probably already exists, but it's always an inexact science because you have no idea what a human being is going to do. You can't read another person's mind. You can assess as best you can, but you have no idea how another person is going to respond when you put them into the mix with a bunch of other human beings. And as the saying goes, David, real life always differs from a
Sure
lab
does.
test.
I do. Reminds me of a conversation I had with one of the very, very best and brightest guys that I've known and even had the privilege of working with. Is a guy called Robert Alvarez, who was the COO and CFO of Big Commerce. And he was very famously of the Eddie and Mitch, who are the founders of Big Commerce, used to say, Rob, why do you always hire the best people? Why is it that you pick everyone you pick on your hiring always turns out to be our star performers? And he said, well, that's easy. He said, because I hire for bucket one and bucket two. So bucket one, they look good on paper. They have all the right resume and points that might suit. But bucket two also has the emotional intelligence, the character. So they don't have just the capability, they have the emotional intelligence, they have the aptitude, etc. So he's always saying, I'm looking for that person. That person knows where they fit in with the team and they want to be in the team. And if the CEO wants to do this to win, or they're okay. So I feel like Rob did that well before ChatGPT. He's a
Right.
superpower in the hiring department. He's had at least 4 exits. He's a beast. But I think the point you make around aptitude and wanting to win is such an important part of that sort of X factor, isn't it?
Absolutely. And it's, as I said, it's an inexact science, but it's a fingertip feel type of skill. So the guy you just described, he has that fingertip feel for reading people. And listen, everybody sounds good in a job interview. It's what are they going to be
Absolutely,
after the
like
interview?
Excel.
Once you
Everything
put them
looks
in the
good on
mix.
Excel.
Yes, exactly. How are they going to be when you put them in the mix with everybody else in the room? That's really what it comes down to. And whoever does the best job of getting that right, those are the people who end up winning. Because again, if you're hiring and you have high filters, then you're getting people who, first of all, they have to have checked all those boxes. They know how to make themselves look good. These people aren't dummies, and they know how to make themselves
Absolutely.
sound good.
So one of the things, like we're both fanatics for execution, Dre, and I always say to founders, I can predict your success by looking at your calendar, and I can also have an even a better shot at looking at that in terms of who you're hiring. What do you think about the question of what do founders or CEOs focus on? How do they then leverage their teams to get the best outcomes? And then what do they do with their time? I feel like those three questions at a CEO level are very telling when it comes to the success of an organization, right? What's your
I agree. I mean, where your time is going is telling you where you're going, where your company is going, where you're going to be going personally, and where you're going professionally. And of course, it depends on what is the aim of the business, what season is the business in, what are we actually trying to achieve here. But leaders, I mean, it's always been noted that CEOs spend as much time as they spend at work, they spend very little time getting actual work done because there's so many demands on them and everybody's knocking on their door and they're making themselves too available. As soon as when you become a CEO, now you have a bunch of inbound, everybody wants to talk to you, and you don't get a lot of time to actually do your job. So, what is the CEO actually focusing on? Do you have any type of layers between you and the outside world, such as this could be your executive assistant, it could be your operations managers who can handle all the day to day stuff so that you can focus on the big picture of, as they say, working on the business rather than in the
Yeah, that brings
business?
me to, I guess my favorite word for CEOs is no. Like, you got to protect your time and your energy,
Right.
etc. So, one of the questions I wanted to unpack for the audience is, what do you decide to solve and do? I mean, literally, there are 1,000 different entry points that you could attack a company at. They're in growth phase, they're defense. I love a sports analogy, but there are just so many different things and places you could start which get the outcomes. It's almost like there are so many business coaches out there that doing something is better than nothing, but like what to solve, like decision based, saying this is the priority. How do you think about priorities when everyone is under pressure?
Good question. So, the first question is what's the goal? Whether I'm working with an individual or working with a company, the first, only two things I want to know when I come in the door. Number one, what's the goal? Number two, what's in your way? Because the only reason I'm coming in the door is because something's in the way. Because if the goal is clear and they're getting it, they're not calling me. So they're calling me because there's something in the way of them reaching the goal. What do you feel is in the way? They're not always right about it. That's the clarity part. And then what's the goal? Usually they're pretty clear on what the goal is. Not always, actually. That's not true. They usually are directionally clear on what they want to achieve and what's in the way. Sometimes they're right, sometimes they're wrong. So once I'm clear on those things, then we can prioritize. Okay, well, if the goal is, let's say the company wants to make more money, and right now we don't have enough leads. Okay, let's figure out where are your leads coming from right now? When you were getting enough leads, where were they coming from? What have you been doing since? What has changed? And then we can focus on that because this is what's the closest thing that produces the desired outcome. You need more sales. You already have the prospects. You're just not closing deals. Okay, let's look at your sales process. Or you don't have any prospects. Okay, let's look at your lead flow process. Where is the breakage actually happening? So that diagnosis is very important. What I find, David, is that a lot of leaders, whether they be solo entrepreneurs or leaders of big companies, they often misdiagnose what the actual problem is. Either because they're just not seeing it properly, they're looking at it from the wrong angle, or because they're too close to it. So they personalize it, or they're too far away from it because they're not getting direct field level information because they are too many layers removed from what's happening on the day to day. The good thing about someone like myself coming from the outside is that the operator of a company or people on the ground level who are 10 toes down in the field, they can communicate with me with a level of honesty with which they can't give to the CEO. Because you work for that person, you got to be careful how honest you are with your boss. They can be honest with me. So I can find out what's really going on. And then get back to the leadership and say, okay, here's what's actually happened. Here's the real problem. And they wouldn't know that problem because, again, they can't get close enough or get unfiltered enough information to really be clear on what's happening. It's not that the leadership is not smart. It's just that the way things are set up, they can never get that information properly.
100%. It reminds me of I guess, a thinking model that I use like pretty much every day, and I call it perception, which is really what you're describing. Is like, do people even get what's happening? What do we need to do here? Communication. So perception, communication, decision what, then decision how, then execution, and then repeat.
Mm,
Um, because a lot of times people are seeing a result, but they don't know, was it a perception problem? Was it a communication problem? Was it a decision what or a decision how or an execution problem? So having an understanding of where in the chain, you use the word chain, broke, that helps maybe find the clarity and solve the problem faster. Do you use many thinking models in what you do, or is this intuitive because it's a clarity? What's in my way? What's the way that what's some of the things in your tool belt there, Dre?
Well, the first thing is the orientation. I
I
think
think
we're
so.
talking about the same things. We just may
Yeah.
use different languages. Yeah. So it's the orientation, then is the clarity of it, then it's figuring out where exactly is that problem happening, and then the execution is the last part. Execution is always going to be the last part because that's what actually gets the job as
Yes.
described done. So yes, that's the
I love it.
process
So,
I
and
use.
I also read that you've done some work and training people in the military. Is that right?
I've had some military people come through my programs. I haven't actually done any training with the
Okay,
military
but you've had
directly.
some people in that. So what are you thinking in terms of the precision and disciplines that are often the hallmarks of leadership training and having people following routine versus creativity? So I think you were touching on like the outcome, and this is where it can sometimes be heavy, the information to say, we've got to follow, we've got to have disciplines, we've got to have processes, we've got to have systems, tools, install all these things. But we also know that in spite of where we are today with Anthropic and OpenAI, et cetera, some of the best things that are still to come are going to come from our clarity of our thinking, our taste, our judgment, and all these sorts of things. How do you balance systems with companies that, and often founders, I think, leave large companies because they think it was too bureaucratic? But
Right.
what's the right level of systemizing versus stifling a company?
Well, we look at a company like Google. I don't know if they still have this policy, but they had a policy where company people who worked there got to take 10% of their time and work on a rocket ship project. This guy named Astro Teller. I'm not sure you're familiar with him. And he talked about that. Like they took a certain amount of time from their scheduled work time, and you can just work on, I think they called it a moonshot project. Something that might work is a 90% chance it won't work. But if it does work, then the ROI is way bigger than anything. And this is where Google got a lot of their best ideas came from working on these moonshot projects. So it's great for companies to have those kind of policies because if you're hiring for high level people, and Google, from what I've heard, has very high filters for who they hire, these people are pretty smart. So you want to give smart people a chance to just use their smartness in a way that is not legislated to them and told how to do it. While at the same time, you do have the processes in place where you take these smart people and have them work on these problems that are defined and clear, then they're probably going to solve them because they're smart people. So you have smart people, you want to put them in the best position to use their smartness to best help the company, also help themselves, stay stimulated, stay activated and engaged in the job. The same thing you'll do with a sports team. You get your players and you figure out, okay, based on the players that we have, what's the best system that will most maximize the talent that we have invested in? Same thing you do in sports, same thing you
Can
do in
I ask you a
business.
personal question?
Sure.
So, as a professional athlete, one of the most immediate pieces of feedback you got was you scored. People applauded. Now in the boardroom, it's a little bit delayed. What are some of the things that you've enjoyed the most in this transition and seeing the teams win, and how have you celebrated? What's made you feel good about this process that you couldn't get from you
Well,
can only get from professional sport in some ways?
yeah, well, the sports world is short. The entire sports life is short. It's your career is short. The ROI from what you do happens very shortly after you do it. You shoot the ball, it goes in the basket. You shoot, you miss. You play a game, you win. You play a game, you lose. You get feedback immediately. Whereas in the non-sport professional world, the feedback can take a lot longer. It takes a lot longer to build it up. It takes a lot longer to establish yourself, and it takes a lot longer to get results. And it takes longer for other people to recognize you as a results producing individual. It takes years to build up and establish yourself in the business world as opposed to the sports world where you can get established off one great game if enough people
I
saw it.
don't think I
So
think it's that
it's
simple. I
having
think that
the
you're underselling the work that goes into being a professional athlete. I think there's yeah.
Well, sure. One thing that I tell people all the time is that to be a professional athlete, first of all, the number one thing you need is a set of genetics that most people don't have. And that's not work based. That was God given. Yes, exactly. That's just your parents, that's genetics. Now, let's say there's X number of people who are above that line who are qualified. Not all of them make it. This is where the work comes into play, but you're only competing against the people who've already been chosen genetically to compete. You're not competing against everybody. So, yes, there is work that goes into it. But I often think, listening to people who are on social media, I hear people talking about who are not athletes, that they tend to think that every athlete makes it just based on hard work. LeBron James didn't hard work to be 6'9" and have all that fast twitch muscle. He didn't work for that. He just got it. Now, the work made him good, but let's not undersell the genetics that put him in the space in the first place. And I say that in a self-deprecating way as an athlete, because my dad's like 5'8". I'm 6'4". Had I been 5'8", I probably wouldn't have made it as a basketball player. That's just the reality. Yeah, and yes, the work does come in as an athlete because you do have to work hard because you're competing for a job and only 1% of people get. 1 to 2% of people get, despite the fact that everybody wants it. So then going on with the business side of things is that in
Yeah, one
business,
sec,
it
my
takes
light's
a
just
lot
gone off,
longer
hang
to
on.
get the, oh, yeah, see, all right, it's back on
Sensors.
now.
This'll be interesting.
So I guess you got to wave your arms every few minutes to make sure it knows you're still there. Yeah. So continuing what I was saying, in the business world, it takes a little bit longer for the ROI, and it's not as obvious. In the sports world, when you're known and you produce results, you walk into a room, everybody knows who you are. In the business world, you can be producing results consistently, but you can walk into certain rooms and still nobody knows who you are. You can be anonymous and very successful in business. In sports, it's hard to be anonymous when you're very successful because sports is a front-facing job. Everybody sees it. In business, the type of work that I'm doing, the type of work that you're doing, we're often working on the backside. We're not on the front where we're not dealing with customers. We're not on get on Forbes magazine helping people with execution.
Come on.
Maybe if you sell your company. If you sell your company for enough
Jay, we
money,
have a
then
shot here,
yes.
man. We have a
But the
shot.
work itself, yes, exactly. The work itself, though, is not front facing. It's not sexy. It's just the stuff that makes things work. It's the stuff that makes the stuff happen. So it's having the level of, it comes back to that word discipline that we started with. The discipline to accept that this is not, word I would use is not sexy. It's not celebrated generally. And just being okay with that, producing the result, helping the result get produced is the
It is
payoff for the job.
so electrifying, really, when you're that person that you're getting the WhatsApp message and they're saying, "Oh my God, I need some help." You step in and you can hold the hand and solve a problem and be there and hold them accountable. I personally find that very, very gratifying in so many ways. I'm glad you're enjoying it as much. It may not be as the immediate feedback, and it takes a bit longer. The game goes a bit longer. It's the infinite game business, really, in many respects, I think. So, is there some
Absolutely.
sectors that you're particularly interested in that you're seeing that are like a lot of companies are risk on, risk off? They're suffering for the knowledge economy and AI, etc., or different things. So many companies are having product market fit collapse at the moment. If they're tech, supply chains, what gets your interest, Dre? What do you love being in the room of and say, this is if you could pick 3 areas that you'd love to work in, what are the ones that you think are super interesting at the moment?
Number one is sales, just because I'm a natural salesperson, always been a salesperson. And sales is the closest thing to sports in business because it's black and white. There's a clear scoreboard and you can't lie about the outcome. Whereas in other businesses is a little bit more gray. So I would say sports number one. Number two, then I would go off of just the type of people who have generally responded to me the strongest over time. And number two would probably be in the finance space. A lot of accountants, a lot of financial advisors. I have no background in finance, so I don't know why, but those people have always gravitated towards me. I think because of my analytical style, my logic-based style, and finance is very black and white. So those people tend to gravitate to me. That would be number two. And number three, if I could pick one more, number three has often been, I don't know if this even counts as an industry. You can tell me if I'm cheating here, but a lot of solo entrepreneurs, people who have just started their venture and then they slowly want to build it up. They like me because they know they can talk to me, be honest with me, and get honest
I think
feedback.
that's a really good one to dive into as well, Dre, because I think that there's a whole bunch of people out there that have almost ruined the coaching word or the mentoring word by people telling people what to do. Whereas, you can't learn to swim reading a book. You can't learn to play basketball watching a podcast. You got to go and do it and have experience before theory. And I often say people are poisoning the brains of CEOs by giving them playbooks or showing them, here's how to fix your landing page or here's how to explain your go to market better, etc. What's your take on the right level of developing the CEO versus doing the work for the CEO?
Great question. I'll add in one more industry there, also the legal industry. That's one
Okay,
that I
well, you
forgot.
can have one more.
Black and white, analytical,
Okay,
finance,
well,
legal,
we'll,
very
we'll
similar.
group them then. You have a type.
Yes, and I do. So answering your question, the work between, you said developing the
I feel
CEO, and
like
what was the
there's
other side
some
of it?
a lot of coaches overshare or will send them, oh, I feel like you're not making any sales because you don't understand your customer. Here is my ideal customer profile document that you need to adopt and run with. Or here is some tweaks to stop using that website. Here's your new lovable landing page. And here's all the things that you should start doing instead of figuring out what your customer needs or figuring out how to create more value, because all of a sudden they're just completely reliant on you, and you want the best people. You want to give them an edge, not to become reliant. You don't want them to become, I need the drug of Dre. I want to be, you want them to outgrow you in some ways. You want to give them the edge and the 1%, but you also want to let them have the confidence to go on without you rather than become so reliant on you. And I call it the anti-mentoring thesis. I've written an article about this. So like you can
Yes.
overshare, overtell, and that does more damage in my opinion. But I'd love your take on it.
Yes, and like we say, we want to build leaders, not followers. You don't want people to be just following you at all times. You want people to take in your stuff and then go do something to where they become the person that other people come want to hear their stuff. And that's always been my approach, even with creating content. You mentioned YouTube back in the day. It wasn't for you to just watch me. It's for you to take what I was giving you, then you go do something. And now you have an audience because you're so good at what you do. The end game is not just watching me. And it's the same thing when it comes to coaching and consulting. The end game is not you needing me. I can be an advisor over an extended period of time, but it's not because you need me. It's because you like having that sounding board, somebody who can hold space, somebody you can bounce ideas off of. But it's not because you couldn't operate. If I was away for 3 months, you couldn't do anything. That's not the way it's supposed to work. So when it comes to CEOs having issues and challenges, it's always simplifying. We talked about this a lot when it comes to clarity. Simplifying. If someone already has a business and you've already had success, okay, who's your ideal customer? Of all the customers you've had and all the clients you had, who's your favorite? Who are your favorites? How did you get them? Let's focus on how we get more people like that. And if you just focus on that, you'll still get some people from outside of that target spot, the bullseye in the concentric circles. But if you just focus on that, more of those people are going to start coming your way. And the discipline is you have to stay there and keep doing it long enough for the market to get the point that this is where you're at and they come around to you. The challenge that I find with most human beings, especially in the world that we're in today with our technology, is that people don't have they don't stay. They don't stick around long enough on one thing for the world to get the message. It's kind of like Google does their indexing of your website. You got to keep your website the same way long enough. This is a metaphor. Keep your website the same way long enough that Google can identify that this is what's on your website. You keep changing it every week, that Google can never figure out what it is. So I know you asked about websites. So it's a good mixed metaphor there.
Well, I think
But
it's
the whole
absolutely on
point here,
point that it's, yeah, you discover these things not by jumping every day to something new. Like you're becoming an expert in finessing that nuanced solution rather than,
right?
yeah.
And you have to stay there. You have to stay there long enough to actually learn what's going on, establish yourself as I am here, I have something of value here. And that this is a place that people, if you have this challenge and you're this type of person, then this is the place that you go. But a lot of people won't stay long enough if they don't see the immediate, whatever they consider to be immediate,
Okay, let's
return on
go to
investment.
that then, Dre, the return on investment. You said you weren't a numbers person. I don't believe that. So let's talk about maybe some live clients, like before Dre, after Dre, output per head or output per dollar, or how long it takes to get a result. What are some of the things that you explain through your message that, people should be keeping an eye out for these outcomes? Like, I mean, as I said, it's not a game. It's one of the most noble things you can do in life is run a business and helping people win more often. And I call it making increasingly narrower misses, and refining to work out what the truth is. And how do you think about the return on investment with, is it better differentiation? Is it better positioning? Is it better clarity for, and what does that translate into in terms of margin or retention or profit?
No, sometimes just making more money. Sometimes it's
That was
bringing
it.
more money into the company. Yeah, Dan Kennedy called it selling money. All right, so if you're telling people that you can help them increase their revenue by $100,000, then it's an easy decision to pay you 50, all right, because you're going to help them make more money. Yeah, sometimes it's that simple. And that's where it comes back to what we talked about earlier is if your system is proven, you know that your system works. The problem is you're just not getting execution of the system. Okay, if we get everyone executing on the system, then you know you're going to make more money and get more returns. So let's just get everyone executing on the system because we know that doing this leads to that. And oftentimes the frontline point, the frontline problem I hear from a leader when I first come in contact is I want to bring in more money or we're not bringing in the amount that we want to bring in. Usually it's something like that. And sometimes someone will go downstream and say, okay, we're not executing. We're not getting execution. People aren't following the system the way it's supposed to be. And usually most of the time it's if the system is being followed, if everything that's supposed to be getting done gets done, we know, or I know, this is going to produce the outcome. So really it's just fixing. It's a simple problem fix, but not always an easy
100%. And I
problem
think that
fix.
you're touching on a revenue model in some ways. It's not the outcomes. You don't just say, I'd like these outcomes and cross your fingers. There's behaviors to learn, behaviors to embed and fix and to keep doubling down on and to keep testing to see which one gives what result and finessing yourself to that revenue. So that is, in my opinion, a revenue model in play. So like,
Absolutely.
these
If
are all
you're helping
business
them make
terms,
money,
right? Like, I
easy
mean, I'm
decision.
not letting you get away with that. It's
Yes, it's
all
all
business.
business.
It comes back to numbers and profits, etc. So, I wanted to jump to what I call um, the lightning round because we have a very very famous section here, and a lot of our guests have a lot to offer, and you're a very. I love the fact that you've had these two careers, and that we're getting to hear some of your wisdom, but. We've gone into some real good detail, and I know that the listeners are going to love that. But we have this thing called the lightning round. So it's really the first thing that you can think of. There's no right answers, wrong answers, no detailed explanations. First thing that comes to mind, Dre. Lightning round. Are you ready? Okay.
Yes.
Okay. Ready on the free throw line. Okay. So what was the moment in your life that you almost quit, and what kept you in that?
When I got my first job playing basketball and it didn't work out the way that I wanted to, had to go back home to Philadelphia and I was working overnight at a supermarket stocking shelves. So I wasn't going to quit basketball, but it was if it was ever depression in my life, it
And
was
here
that
you
time.
are. Love it. So, of the 8 countries that you played in, which one changed you the most?
First one, Lithuania. It was my first time. It was my first time out of the country, first time in Europe, and it was a
I
surreal
love
feeling.
so what is something special about Lithuania I know we have some people in Lithuania listening to this.
The women, all tall, blonde, blue eyes. It's an easy question.
Um, what is the book on your nightstand right now?
There's no books on my nightstand, but on my shelf, the book that I just started rereading is The Prince by Niccolo Machiavelli.
So why should we read that?
Well, Machiavelli is my favorite author is Robert Greene. So I came across Machiavelli through
I
Robert Greene.
have
You familiar with Robert
100%.
Greene? Yeah. And Machiavelli's book is all about understanding that if you try to be good too often, you're going to come across people who are not good and they will take advantage of you. So you have to know when to shake hands and when to wield the sword.
I need to read that book, Dre. Like, I feel like the word discerning is coming to my mind. I could always be that.
Yes,
Dre, if
exactly.
there was a warning label on you, what would it say?
Warning is I will be sometimes harsh or blunt with the truth.
I think that's a nice thing. And what's the one thing about you that every day that you do that no one really sees?
Wake up early and I go work out. Most people don't see me doing it, but the results usually
Okay.
you can
Well,
tell.
all that working out, so Dre, so my last question, what is your guilty pleasure?
No, candy. I ordered some yesterday, and the guy delivered it after I went to sleep, and I'm trying to find it. So I got to go down to the front desk and figure out where the hell is my
So what's
candy.
on the what's in the box? What are you having?
I ordered like 6 things, but then when I spoke to the company, they said they sold out of a bunch of it, and it's like actual Swedish candy. They import from Sweden. So she said it's gonna be a month before they get more. They only had 2 things. So one of them was some gummy bears, and the other one was some peach, like these, little peach gummies. That's all they had left. So that's in the bag unless somebody stole my candy. So I'm gonna go find out, investigate where my candy is as soon as
It
we're done
sounds
with this
like you
call.
probably liked, candy as a kid, so I'm gonna ask you one last question. If your 22-year-old self met you now, how would they say you've changed?
Well, a lot of things that I said I wanted to do. I knew I was going to play sports, but I knew sports weren't forever. So I knew I was going to have to do something after sports. I'd be very grateful for the internet because what we're doing right now, didn't exist when I was 22. And I knew I wanted to be an entrepreneur somehow, some way, but I didn't know how to get in. And the social medias, internet, whatever we call this, where we can interact with other people all around the world and do business. I'm so glad I took advantage of it, and it came around right when I got out of college. It would say you took advantage of the opportunities in front of you.
He'd be high-fiving you now. Be going, "Go you, mate." So, last question, Jay. So, and this one you can reflect on. You don't have to be lightning answer, but so to our audience tomorrow, and they're in the car listening to this podcast, and they're thinking about their team that hasn't maybe delivered on the plan. And they're thinking they've heard about discipline and mindset and designing and falsifiable things that they might be seeing in their team that they need to falsify. One thing they can take away from you now, like that you might say, please start here. Try this thing
You
they
mean
can
something they
apply in
would
their own company now without you being in the room. Just one thing that, I mean, I always remember this thing that one of my favorite stories is um, when I watched Eddie Murphy on Raw, and he said, "You guys are going to say I was really funny, but you're going to go home and stuff my joke up. So I'm going to give you one that you can carry with you into the room." So that's my question to you which is to say, what's
yeah.
something that people can apply now that right tomorrow they heard this, they heard you about talking about execution. Obviously, I'd love you to share your details so people can get in touch. But what's one thing that people might think about right now? Because I know we have a lot of entrepreneurs who listen to this podcast.
While this is a results and outcome based business, always has been, always will be, you can't always control the outcome because outcome usually depends on other people's involvement. You can 100% control execution. Execution is in sports, for example, we have these plays that we run. We're supposed to box out on every free throw. You're supposed to close out on every shooter, make the right pass, get a good shot. If we do that properly, given the talent we have on this roster, we will win most of our games. That's the execution. Now, if you happen to run into Kobe Bryant and LeBron James and Michael Jordan and get beat, okay, we got beat, but did we execute? That's what you control. Did we execute the way we're supposed to execute and uphold our standards on a daily basis? If you do that, assuming you have a good system, you're in a good market, you know your customer, and you have good people on your team, most of the time you're going to win, even though sometimes you may lose. That is the one thing that anyone can take with them here, is one thing that everybody listening to this has 100% control over is your execution. You do not control the
Love it,
outcome.
mate. Love, love, love it. So where can we find you? Obviously have all of these details in the show notes, but from you, what an absolute epic operator that you are, and an absolute pleasure to have you on the podcast. So where can people find you, Dre?
People can get a quick score of what we call the Execution Reliability Index. Just go to workonyourgame.com. Game.com. Of course, you can find me on all your favorite social media platforms, whichever one you like. Just look my name up.
Love it.
Easy to
Thank
find.
you so much for being on the Epic Execution podcast, and great to catch up. What a wealth of wisdom and second career in the making, going gangbusters. Congratulations on all your success, and maybe one more TEDx talk in you. Who knows?
Maybe. Well, David, I appreciate the opportunity. Thank you for sharing
Absolute
your
pleasure.
platform with me.